and welcome to the Scary Goals Club. I am your host, Hazel Robertson, and I believe that to make the impact that you know you are called to make in the world, it requires setting bigger, scarier goals and then becoming the person who creates them. That is what I am here to show you how to do. That's what we're diving into with mindset, tools, tricks, really simple, practical, actionable steps you can take and start applying straight away. Because whatever you believe, we have this one life that we definitely know about. Start making the impact you know you want to make in the world. Fear is not a reason to stop. We keep going. We work through the fear. That is what we do in the Scary Goals Club. So come on in, come join, hit subscribe, and let's get started. Hi, and welcome to the Scary Goals Club podcast. It is the final podcast episode of 2024. Oh my goodness, what the fuck? I'm sorry to swear, but like literally what the fuck? When I set this goal, like if you've been following along from the start, and if you haven't, I will explain there. Sometime in February, I set myself a challenge, a goal, a scary goal of recording 30, I think it was 30, I don't even have it, like I'd already surpassed it and finished it. Yeah, 30 podcast episodes by the end of this year, December 31st. 2024. And I can't remember exactly when I passed that. Maybe it was like September. It was a few months ago anyway. And it's crazy to think that this is like in a few days is the date that I had written down like on my scary goal back in February when I was so terrified about starting a podcast, so terrified about like putting things out into the world and like what if no one listened and what if it was terrible and like all of these things that had held me back literally for years. If you haven't listened to the very first episode, you can go listen there and give a bit the context of like I wanted to do this for years, and I'd even like practiced recording some and I'd edited them like almost 4 years ago now, and never put them in the world. They were just like I found them on a Google Drive and was like, wait, what? And to think it's just the craziest thing. Like when you have your goal written down on a piece of paper and you have what it is, and then it's like the date and you have like created your goal. And even if you haven't, you just kind of shift the date and that's all good. But like it is mad. And I like I can't even like when I was imagining back in February, you know, who that version of me was that was able to every single week. Okay, I've missed maybe like a couple weeks when for like mental health days, and I've just decided like it's easier to just not put one out than like beat myself up and force something. But like pretty much it's been every single week since February. And I am so, I'm so freaking proud of myself for that, because social media for me has always been a bit sporadic and on and off. And I don't always like being on my phone because then I can get sucked into like scrolling, and I haven't quite figured out a way to get that really consistent. But the podcasting, maybe it's also because I like to chat I like explain things, like doing things, writing stuff out, doing like short reels, things like that, like doesn't feel as, I mean, I can do it, but it doesn't feel like it comes as naturally as like literally chatting away, which is why I just love this, like love the podcast format, because I just get to chat about things that interest me and excite me and things I'm struggling with and things that I've learned, and hopefully pull out useful things that are useful for you with your scary goals, whether that's like in your business, at work, like outside of work, in any part of your life. Like it, and it is amazing to actually think back about that. And it's also really fun because this episode that I want to do today for this kind of like final episode of 2024 is about reflecting, is about carving out time to just look back over this past year, over 2024, and just like see how far you've come, even if it feels like it's been a crap year, a shit year, and like you haven't made any progress, which that is still a story that I tell myself, even though I have this amazing, you know, I've created this amazing thing with this podcast. The story that my brain defaults to is like 2024 was a really hard year. Like you failed at this, you failed at that. Like I got super burned out. I was like really depressed and just really, really low, like earlier in this year, and had this program that I had put so much time and effort and money into creating for months. And then I decided to like close it down. So like and there's been a few other things. There's been a lot of uncertainty that Luke and I have had, and just like it feels like it's been such a hard year. And it's easy for my brain to tell me, oh, glad 2024 is out of the way, like, come on, 2025. But what is so important is this is what often we can do as humans is like, we're on to the next thing, or all we can remember and focus on is the things that didn't go well, or the times that we did fail, or the times we messed something up, or the times we like struggled with stuff. That is what we like. Our brain is just wired to look for things that haven't gone right, quote unquote, or like danger, and they will focus on that. So it's normal that our brains will look at that and tell that as a bit of a story. And last night it was so nice. I sat down like in the evening, like Luke was putting Flynn to bed, and I'd made this soup and it was quite good. I don't know if you've ever made soup where you roast the veggies. It's literally amazing because you don't have to like stand at the hob and like stir it or like keep checking on it. It was like chop the, what was it, like carrots and sweet potatoes, shove them in the oven for like 40 minutes, give them a poke, set a timer, and then that's like 40 minutes you can do something else, chuck them in a pan with lentils, bring it to the boil. That's it. And then blend it this morning. Anyway, if you want my soup recipe, it's so good. I used to like cut and like put the things in a pot and stir them around. And now it's like, oh my God, you can just put them in the oven and like literally don't have to think about them. And I think when you roast stuff, it tastes better. Anyway, I'm getting to the point of this. And so I like made the soup stuff was in the oven, like roasting. Kitchen was all like tidied. Luke was doing Flynn's bed, and I was like, I'm just going to sit down and start my end of year like reflecting on 2024. And I like to do this like before the end of the year. And actually, for me, like some people like to sit down and do it in one go or like spend a lot of time. I actually quite like doing it in a few different chunks because I find like even, and I'll talk you through like what I've been doing and then you can do it as well if you want. But like I find almost doing it in little bits, my brain comes up with all the other things of like, oh, this worked. And like this thing was really cool. And it like finds all the other amazing things as well. So it's not just like doing it in a oneer. It's like, oh, I'll add that to the list. I'll add that to the list. I'll add that to the list of like wins for the year. So it was so nice. And I like made a cup of, what was it? It was like a puck of tea, the like sleepy tea in like this really nice mug that we bought that someone had like handmade locally. And like we chatted to the person that made it. And it's just, Flynn picked out the color and it's just like such a nice mug. Like had it in that, lit this candle that's like, again, locally made. And it's all this like really nice, it's got like an orange and, I don't know what it is, orange and spice. Anyway, it basically smells like Christmas. Had that lit and I was just like, this is so nice. And I just sat down, I like opened to a new like fresh page of my journal and I had the questions and I just wrote and like answered them. And it was interesting also because journaling is something I maybe used to do a lot more of it, and it's something that I haven't done as much recently. And it was such a nice process. I don't know if you do much journaling or not. I go in and out of stages of it, but it was so nice to just like write things down, get stuff out of my brain, and just look at the list of this year and be like, holy shit, okay, for what like my brain is giving me the story as this like really hard year and this like fail year and this low point year, there's actually been so many amazing things that have happened that I have created, that I've worked through, like lessons that I've learned. And that is why like reflecting and carving out that time is so powerful, because there is always going to be way more amazing things that have happened that you've created or that you've learned than you're giving yourself credit for. So however you're thinking about 2024, whatever kind of year it has been for you, this is why like at the start of every single session with my coaching clients, we go through like, what are your wins from the week? Because it's easy to be like, oh, but this problem, oh, but this, oh, but this. And it's like, oh, wait, actually, I did this. I didn't say yes automatically to this thing. I caught my brain doing that and didn't spin out. I actually felt really calm for this presentation. I did this. And it's like all of those, we think they're small things, but actually it's those micro moments and decisions where normally we would default to something else, and instead we have changed and we've become like a different person in the way that we're reacting and responding to something. That is where all the magic happens. It's not like these big, even thinking like the podcast and doing it pretty much weekly since February, that's been a series of micro moments and decisions every single week of like, oh, I don't want to do it, but I'm doing it anyway. Or like, oh, I'm too scared to talk about this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Or, oh, this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And it's easy to think about like, oh, it has to be these big grand things, but big things like big change is actually tiny, micro, small moments. That is why like celebrating wins is so powerful, and celebrating the tiniest, smallest things. Like those are everything. Those are what create the big things. Big things are made up of tiny, small, micro things. So I just want to offer that when you're going through this process, not to discount like, oh, that was too small. Oh, that doesn't count. If you start counting every single thing, you build momentum and the small things become big things. I promise they add up. But if we discount the small stuff, then we feel defeated. Then we're like, oh, what's the point in trying anyway? And like we don't create the big stuff. Is if you consistently like change and shift and celebrate all the tiny micro things, like that's what adds up. So I just want to offer that as well. And I think it's so easy, especially at this time of year, to be like, okay, 2025 and like goals, and I'm going to do all these things in 2025. Like, see you later, 2024. But actually, there is so much like richness. There's so much we can learn from even the bits that were hard, even the bits that didn't go to plan, or where we didn't show up how we wanted to, or things that felt hard, or situations that happened, or circumstances around us that like we'd rather not have. If we can really be present with all the hard stuff as well and reflect on it and draw out the lessons, those lessons we can take into 2025. So we're not just like, because if we don't, here's what happens. Like if we don't reflect, if we don't, like if you don't have a weekly or monthly reflection process or daily, I really highly recommend you build one in, even if it's just like running through the day in your mind and being like, oh, that was awesome. Okay, maybe I'll change this for tomorrow, or whatever it is. We can risk doing the same things again and again and again because we're not actually pausing enough to be like, is that the decision I wanted to make? Is that the way I wanted to show up? Is that how I wanted to be? And if we're not conscious about it, we just act on default the next day. So it's like, and we do the same thing, or we like, and suddenly it's like months and months of like nothing really changes. Whereas if we can build in reflection, and oftentimes a lot of people, and this might be you, is like reflection can feel a bit scary. This used to be like for me as well. I used to be like, oh, but then like if I look at what went well or what I'd maybe change, then I'm just going to beat myself up. Then it's going to feel awful. And like, I can't even, it was almost like I couldn't look at the bits where I hadn't met this like really high expectation I had of myself because I would just feel shit. And here's the thing, that feeling shit, or like, however, like horrible or shame or whatever feeling it would be, that is completely optional. So like that is caused. So if you're like thinking back about something that didn't really go to plan or something you would change, if you're feeling shame around that, that's because of the story that you're telling, or it's the story I was telling about whatever had happened. Like, oh, I'm not enough. Oh, that was really stupid. Oh, this, oh, that. Like, if I'm beating myself and being really horrible for like a mistake I made or something that didn't go to plan or a decision I made, of course I'm not going to want to look at it. I'm just going to want to be like, oh, I can't look at it because I'm going to be so mean to myself about it. Whereas if you can approach it with like love and curiosity of like, I wonder what happened there. And just being like, knowing that whatever happened, you're a human. Sometimes humans make mistakes. Sometimes we make decisions that we're like, okay, maybe next time I wouldn't make that decision. But in the moment, like you're doing the best you can. Like you're making the decision you can in the moment with whatever's going on for you. You're doing the best you can. And it's just being so kind that you were doing the best you could. You had good intentions. You weren't trying to do something wrong or trying to make a mistake. And if you can just be kind to yourself, it's so much easier to then look at maybe what you would change and then think about that. Because when we can look at the stuff that felt hard or the challenges and pull out lessons, that's when it actually becomes so powerful, because it's not like, oh, well, I made these mistakes and that's just that. And then we beat ourselves up. It's like, no, there's so much richness in that. Like, ooh, what did I learn from that? Like, what is going on? And sometimes like what I have found, and this year has been one of those years, is like when it feels the hardest is when we can learn the most from it. When it feels like we're just like, oh my God, is this like ever gonna stop? This relentless like setbacks and challenges and just things feeling really hard, that is when we learn the most from it. Like from being burned out earlier this year and depressed and just being so low, like I know that I'm not getting back into that again because I'm just like, absolutely not. And I also know, so like I like I know on like a cellular level, like in my bones, what not to do, because I've been able to reflect on it and be like, oh, it's because of this, it's because of this, it's because of these things leading up to it. And here's where I didn't catch it. And here's where I did this. And here's where I did this instead. And like, even like, I think back now to like this time last year, I was so ill. I was getting ill all the time. I was like in bed, just like bug after bug after bug, just like everything felt really heavy and really hard. And like, I'm just in such a different place because I'm taking more care of myself. Like, I've implemented different things. I'm not doing things that I should do, that I think I should do, not putting pressure on myself. If I'm having to force something, I'm really like, wait, this is a sign that this maybe isn't the direction I want to go. And so because I've freed up the like, oh, but I should do this, and the people pleasing, and like other people think I should do this, and I've said I've done this, therefore I have to do it. And I've just let that go and be like, what is it I actually want to do? And leaning into that, everything just feels easier. Everything just feels lighter. And like, that's been such a huge win for me. So, but it was hard. Like, I had to learn that the hard way. But would I have been able to learn it if I hadn't learned it the hard way? Maybe, maybe not as much. But now I'm like, oh, I really learned that. And also knowing that like whatever you learn, you can help others with that too. And you can then understand like when other people are maybe going through those things, you're like, oh, I've gone through that too. So I just want to offer that in all of the stuff that feels really hard, sometimes like that is where we learn the most, and it feels rubbish when you're in it. But when you can get out the other side, if you can be really kind to yourself and not beat yourself up and actually take those lessons, like it's so, so powerful. And like taking all of that, then going into 2025, like that's where the magic happens, rather than being like, yeah, cool, on to the next thing, because then we're not really sinking in with like what we've actually created, how we've shown up, how we've kept going, how we've been courageous, how we've like created things and changed and evolved as a person that's different than we were last year, and all the things that we've learned along the way. And we're not really like being present with what amazingness we've actually done, because it's so easy to be like, yep, on to the next thing. And then it's like, well, you're always going to be on to the next thing until you die. I know it sounds a bit morbid, but it's like, whereas if you can just actually be present with it, like you're experiencing your life, you're like experiencing all these things you've been working towards that at one point, like you never had and you wanted. And so, yeah, so I just want to offer that is why just carving out time to reflect and think back over the year is so powerful. So I'm going to talk you through 5 questions, and I'm going to put a 1-pager as well. So if you go to the show notes, you'll be able to download that. If you're on the email list, you'll get that automatically. Oops, I have I've totally like knocked this. Okay, hopefully that's all good. So I now want to talk you through the questions that I like to ask myself. And I'm also going to put these on a 1-pager. So if you go to the link in the show notes, you'll be able to download them. So you don't need to like write this down or try and do it as you're listening. And then just like carve out some time. It doesn't have to be long, even 10 minutes. Like 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, light a candle, get a nice cup of tea, do a question, do 10 minutes like the next day, and just like, or do it all in one go, like whatever feels amazing for you. Just carve out a bit of time, get a nice piece of paper or a journal, fresh page in your notebook, and just give yourself space to think back over the year. Okay, so the first question is to write down, or first thing to do is write down all of your wins from 2024. Anything. Now, there's different ways you can do this. You can just like write them off the top of your head, like whatever comes first, and then you'll go away and you'll like come up with some others. You can think back like chronologically through the year. You can even bring up like your calendar and see what was on in different months. Anything. And the wins aren't just like things you've achieved, things you've created, things you've done, or things you have that you didn't have before. It's like times when you've overcome something. So like one of my wins was like healing from burnout. Like that has been such a huge win for me, and feeling in such a like present, flowy, just like aligned place where I know that what I'm focusing on is like exactly what I want to be focusing on, and I'm letting go of everything I quote unquote think I should do, and just like drowning out the noise and not listening to that and being like, this is what I want to do. Like that has been such a huge win for me. So it's not like something it's not like a project I've completed. It's more like how I have evolved, how I have changed like inside. I feel like this has been a year of like a lot of internal work and then hopefully a lot more external stuff will start to flow next year. But there's been a lot of like processing, like unpicking of deep rooted beliefs this year. And I feel like I'm letting go of those kind of things. So yeah, that is like, those are things are huge wins. So wins can be anything, like literally anything that you think of when it comes to win. There are no wins that are too small, as I said before, just anything that comes to mind. So just write it down, anything that comes to mind, and then just keep adding to that list. Okay, so the second question is then like going back through and thinking about, okay, what were some of the main challenges of the year? Like what were some of the bits that felt really hard, things that happened, things that you made happen, like how you reacted, like any of those things that felt like stand out as being particularly hard. Again, go through your calendar if that's helpful, put a list of them down. And then for each of them, think about, okay, and now what have you learned from this? Like, how did you overcome it? What have you learned? How can you turn that challenge into like amazing wisdom that now you have that like you never would have had if you didn't have that challenge? Like you wouldn't have learned those lessons. You wouldn't have that like broader perspective of life and being a human. You wouldn't understand things on yourself on a deeper level if you hadn't actually faced those challenges. So what are the challenges? And then thinking about like, okay, what have you actually learned from that, the lessons? Okay, the third question is thinking about like, who are you now? Like, who is this version of you? What are you like? How are you being versus this time last year or the start of the year? And because like when we do goal setting work, a lot of it is thinking about like, who is that version of you in the future, your future self, and how do you start becoming that person now? So like when you've created the goal, something's different. You're different in some way. You've learned things, you've grown through the setbacks, the challenges. So it's like at the start of the year, like last year, you would have been thinking about your future self at the end of the year. Or if you don't do future self work, maybe you weren't thinking about your future self at all. But this, like who you are right now, like at one point, you were just imagining this person, or this was you in the future, like, oh, once they've done these things, then I'll be like this. So it's thinking like, who are you now? And how is that different? Like, how are you thinking differently? How are you feeling differently? How are you acting differently? How are you showing up? What things are you saying to yourself? Like, how are you being that's different than you were this time a year ago or like this time at the start of the year? And then the fourth one is to go back through. So actually go back through your calendar week by week or the months and just think about what were the things that you did, so things that you experienced that you have the brightest, fondest memories of, the ones that you're like, oh, that was so good. The ones that when you think about 2024 in the year, they will like shine the brightest. And just making a note of those and thinking, what is it about them that feels so amazing? Because here's the thing, when you can actually pull out the lessons of like experiences that light you up and people that you love being with and things that like bring you joy and things that make you feel alive, like once you know what those kind of key elements are, you can start to build them in intentionally in 2025. So like, for example, for me, so many of my amazing memories are being outside. Maybe it's doing like a different hill or like a different route or going away with friends for the weekend or like being with friends or being with family. And just like, there's definitely for me, there's like a nature element, a kind of newness element, or like doing something where I've like maybe pushed myself a little bit, like maybe a slightly longer trail or gone for like a cold swim or like something that's kind of quite playful, something that's a bit different. And then also being with like amazing people as well. So I know that my like days and experiences where they really like stick with me, those elements are present where there's like a connectedness to myself, connectedness to nature, and a connectedness with people. And so when I'm thinking about like being intentional for 2025 and like, okay, what is it I want to do? What like adventures do I want to go on? It's like making sure like these are the elements that light me up the most. And so it's building those in. So thinking about that for you as well is really, really fun. Okay. And then question number 5 is just writing down, and this is slightly different to wins, but this is just writing like everything in your life right now that you have to be grateful for. Just making a list, like what are you so grateful for to have in your life right now? And there's some extra questions that can help with this. One is like imagining to your future. So imagine you're like at the end of your life looking back on you right now. What would you be grateful for at this age? And so for me, like when I do that and imagine to the future, I'm like, I am so grateful I can run. I am so grateful I can like walk up a hill with my son on my back and like my legs are strong enough to carry him. Like that's the stuff that if I'm just thinking about things I'm grateful for, I maybe don't always pick up on. But when I'm imagining being at the end of my life and not being able to do that, I'm going to be like, wow, like running down a hill, literally the best thing. And it's so fun. Like like he loves running. He loves like anything physical, but like loves running fast down hills. And there was this like, we went out, I don't know if it was like 4ish or something. So it was pretty much dark, but we were out and just like running around on the grass like at this park, and there was like enough light from like I think the moon was out and there was like some floodlights and stuff, so there was enough light. And he just found this like grassy hill, and we were just taking it in turns, like run up the hill, like run back down it, run up the hill, like run back down it. And it was just so fun, just like running down hills fast. It's like you just feel like such a little kid, and I just love it so much. And so I have forgotten what it's all about. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so the being grateful is like when you imagine to the end of your life, it's like, oh wow, having, maybe a certain family or like parents or whatever it is that when you're in it today in the day to day, it's maybe not easy to see all these things that are always there and have always been there. And you think, 'cause you're not thinking about it, will always be there and you'll always have it. But when you imagine to the end of your life and you're like, oh, these things aren't forever. These things are just finite, but like in a way that's beautiful because it's like we can appreciate them so much more now. And so the other fun question with this, of thinking about what you're grateful for now, is like, what about a year ago or 2 years ago? So like, what do you have now that you have created, that you've like made happen, that you have in your life now that at one point was only a dream? And just thinking like, for me, it's like my son at one point, like I didn't know if I'd be able to have kids, and we'd had some miscarriages, and it was like, remembering of like going through that and how hard that was. Like it's so easy is just to be like, wow, like so grateful that he's here and like I have him in my life. And it's just not like, so it's like thinking back a couple of years ago, or even the fact that we're living in Bankery, and it was like when we were wanting to move here and we didn't like know where for rent was coming up, and it was like, will we even be able to move over? Like, what will we do? And it's like easy to just be like, this is where we live now, and this is how things are. But it's like remembering even a year ago or 2 years ago, what you have now that at one point you were dreaming about and one point you were working towards. It's like you are right now like living the dream that you have once had. Like things that you were being like, oh, it'll be so cool when I have this thing. It'll be so amazing when I have this thing. Life will be different when I have this thing. And it's like, you have those things now. So what are those things? And just writing them down, like everything that you're so grateful for. And the key thing with all of it is just also taking a moment to close your eyes and just feel it. So it's not just like making a list and being like, okay, cool, grateful for these things, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, wow, how amazing. Because when we can sink into being just so grateful for what we have now without having to change anything, that is when it becomes so fun and it becomes so powerful to actually create the next thing that we would love to like work towards or to create. When we're just like on to the next thing, we never get that satisfaction. We never like truly feel like we have arrived. And it's almost like, oh, I don't need anything else. And when we can get into that place of like, I actually don't need anything else, but it would be super fun to go do this thing. That's when goal setting is like magical. That is when it becomes easy and flowy and is just like so much fun. So the key thing is feeling it, is sinking into that gratitude and just being like, oh, this life I have right now. Now there's a phrase that I have been practicing and keep coming back to. It's like, I am living my dream life. And I don't know if this is fun, you can borrow it, but like, and try it on. And it's easy if you're starting to practice it, you might be like, yeah, but my dream life is when I have this, or like this house and this thing, and we're going on holiday here, and like, so, and when I'm making this impact and have this many clients and have this and this and this. And it's like, we can pin our dream life of being this like future point that we never reach. But of course, this goalpost will always move. Our brain is wired to be like, okay, what's the next? What's the next? It's the sliding scale. And so unless we appreciate what we have now, unless we believe right now that we are living our dream life, because we are, like at one point this was a dream, unless you believe that truly right now, you'll never get to the point that you think you're living your dream life, because it'll always be like, yeah, but then when I have this, then it'll be the dream life. And so it becomes this never-ending thing that we're chasing and not actually living and being present and appreciating what we have. And then that's it. And then it's over. And then we're like, oh, I didn't even enjoy it while I had it. And so the more that we can just like enjoy exactly what we have right now, we don't need anything else. Like we have everything we need. How amazing. We're living our dream lives. Yeah, sure, there's other stuff that would be so fun. And that will also be us living our dream life. And at every stage, and it's like, even when things are hard, even when there's stuff that's like not working how we planned, or we lose people close to us, or like all of these things that are really hard, like with life, we can still be living our dream life in the areas that we can find it and that we can find what we are to be grateful for. And it's just such a powerful practice for creating goals and for setting scary goals, because like it just becomes so much more fun and so much more playful, and just we enjoy these moments so much more. And so I'll read them out again, but there is also a PDF that you can download. So the first one is writing down your wins. The second one is writing down your challenges and then your lessons. The third one is, okay, who are you now? Like, how are you being? And like, how does that compare to a year ago? The fourth one is, okay, what are the events throughout the year that like sparkle in your mind when you think about them? And what are the key elements? Who are the key people? Like, what are the elements of that you could then recreate? And then 5 is like, what are all the things that you have right now to be grateful for? And thinking again from the end of your life, looking back, add to the list, and then thinking from a few years ago, looking ahead of like, what do you have now that you were once working towards, and like adding to that list as well. And then just sinking into it all and just being like, taking all of the goodness out of 2024, out of like everything that you have created over this year, because whatever year you've had, like here you are figuring yourself out, you are learning new things, you are trying new things, you are keeping going even when it's hard, you're being kind to yourself, like you're here on this planet at all. Like there is so much to celebrate. There is so much to be grateful for. And if you can just point your brain to it, it's gonna just make everything feel a little bit lighter, and then close out 2024 in this amazing way and be like, okay, and now ready for 2025. So I just want to say happy end of 2024. It has been like such an honor to be on this journey with you guys. And like, I don't take any of you for granted, for tuning in, for giving me your attention, for listening to this podcast, for reaching out, for the conversations we've had, for like, yeah, just being on this journey with me. So thank you so much. It has been like, I can't believe you're here towards the end of the year. It is crazy. And yeah, I'm really excited about next year and have some really fun things in store already. So looking forward to helping you create bigger, scarier goals in 2025 and working alongside you. All right. Mwah. Sending so much love, and I'll see you next year. Bye. Hey, thanks so much for listening. If this was helpful, please hit subscribe and leave a review. This helps get this work in the hands of more purposeful people. That is, more people creating bigger, scarier goals, making an even bigger impact in the world. And if you want to take this work deeper and work with me directly, head to the show notes and I put all of the information there. If you've got any questions, or if there's anything you're like, ooh, I'd love you to talk about that on the pod, please just get in touch. I love hearing from you guys. And I'll see you next time in the Scary Goals Club.